So what I'd like to do is talk about the sea lamprey life cycle. Lampreys are an incredibly exciting animal to study because they are the most basal vertebrate. They've been around this earth for over 500 million years. In terms of the life cycle, they're unique for an animal that's been around so long to have a life cycle that goes from freshwater to seawater and back to freshwater. Like Pacific salmon, they spawn once in a lifetime and then they die. Lampreys, after the eggs are fertilized in fresh water, the lampreys develop into what we call larval lampreys. And they're larval lampreys from 5 to 7 years. They spend the 5 to 7 years in freshwater streams. They're buried in the mud and sand. They're filter feeders. They have no eyes and no teeth. Then at the end of that period, in the fall, they undergo one of the most dramatic metamorphoses that we see in any vertebrate, even greater than tadpole changing to a frog. They go from an animal without eyes, without teeth, to an animal that has eyes, teeth, the entire gut changes, and they go from a freshwater animal to a seawater animal. They go from a filter feeder to an animal that's parasitic. They go out to sea, they latch on to ocean, they go out to the ocean, they latch on to fish in the ocean, and they feed with all their teeth. Now their teeth are filled with, their mouth is filled with teeth, their teeth on their tongue. They latch onto a fish, sucking the blood and the meat from the fish out in the ocean. They don't kill the fish, but they'll move on to another fish. They go from an animal as a larval lamprey that looks like a worm, 5 to 7 inches. After 2 to 3 years at sea, they come back and they can be up to 2, even 3 feet long, a very large animal. They return to the freshwater streams from the ocean in late spring. They migrate up into freshwater coastal rivers. They go into freshwater. They undergo 5 specific spawning behaviors. They go through the spawning act, and then they die. One female can release up to 700,000 eggs. So typically 5 to 700,000 eggs is what the lamprey will do. And that's the life cycle.
Why do we study lampreys? We study lampreys because they're the oldest living vertebrate that's still in existence in the world. And so it's very interesting to do comparisons between how did the GnRH system, how did the sexual reproduction system evolve over 500 million years to what we have now. Are there similarities? Are there differences? How are they different? How have they evolved? And are there any applications for even human diseases by studying lampreys and understanding the mechanisms of how this system evolved and came to be what we have now?
So when I started my research over 26 years ago, is that we did not know anything about the brain pituitary control of reproduction in these animals. That's the work that I started in his laboratory, in Professor Gorman's laboratory. And when we started, we did not know the hormones, we did not know any of the receptors, we did not know many of the basic reproductive mechanisms involved in that axis. These animals are the oldest extinct or oldest living vertebrate on this earth. They're ancient. And the question was, did they have the same brain pituitary control of reproduction as all other animals? And you would think they would, because they are ancestral, they have evolved out of the Cambrian evolution, and you would think that they would have the basic conservation of the system. I started here in 1983. In 1986, we discovered with my students and collaborators the first brain hormone involved in reproduction in lampreys. It was extremely exciting. We did this by techniques of protein purification. 6 years later, we found the second GnRH, gonadotropin-releasing hormone, a small protein. Both of these hormones controlled reproduction. We found out through subsequent anatomical, physiological, biochemical, and molecular experiments that this brain pituitary axis is highly conserved and is found in lampreys and is comparable to all other vertebrates, to mammals, birds, fish, amphibians, reptiles. And so it's been very exciting that over the last 26 years we have determined the structure of the hormones, we've determined the genes of the hormones, we've determined the function of the hormones, and the anatomy. However, there was one area that we called the black box that took us 20 years. And that was the pituitary hormone itself. The brain hormone that we study is gonadotropin-releasing hormone, which acts on the pituitary, which then releases something called gonadotropins. The gonadotropins in humans had been discovered in the 1970s. And so I started a collaboration with Professor Kawauchi from Kitasato University in Japan, and he was a pioneer in the discovery of pituitary hormones in fish and other non